Welcome to Think Yourself Healthy podcast. I'm your host, Heather Duranja. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, cognitive behavior specialist, personal trainer, and recovering perfectionist turned professional half-asser. Thanks for being here and for taking the journey with me from surviving to thriving. Let's dive in with today's episode. Hello, everybody. On today's show of Think Yourself Healthy podcast, I have a very special guest all the way from Germany today with us, and her name is Nila Conzen. Is that correct? Conzen. She is from About the Good Life on Instagram. Nila is a holistic psychologist, yoga teacher, and certified plant-based nutritionist from Germany. Her unique approach blends the latest science in psychology, nutrition, and Eastern mindfulness practices to promote holistic well-being. Nila is passionate about encouraging people to look within to cultivate a more compassionate, healing, and nurturing connection to themselves and ultimately find the truth of who they are, perfectly whole in all of their imperfection. Thank you so much, Nila, for being with us today. What a beautiful mission you're on. I absolutely, really admire the work that you're doing. It's so important that we get the information out there and start having conversations with individuals talking about imperfection and giving ourselves permission to know that it's okay to not have to be perfect and always in judgment of ourselves and others. So I'm really super stoked to have you here to have this conversation. So thank you again for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Heather, and thank you for having me and inviting me to today's show. And it's an honor to talk to you today.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'm super excited to dive deep. We're going to just go right into all of the exciting stuff that both yourself and myself are absolutely obsessed with and, super passionate about and really want to share these messages with others. So I've been a fan of your work and I've been following your page for quite some time. So can you just kind of give me a little idea, talk to the audience about how you got started?
Yeah, sure. So the whole Instagram thing only started about a year and a half ago.
Wow.
But before that, I studied psychology, and I also have a background with an eating disorder and some kind of minor depression and also other hormonal imbalance. So it was all about like taking really good care of myself first before this whole online community share started. So after I finished my master's degree in psychology, I was still on my healing journey, and I always knew that there were some parts missing, like some pieces that were a really big part of healing and embracing the wholeness and all of it. So I dig deeper into the whole field of holistic nutrition, and so I started studying nutrition as well. And I just finished my studies a year and a half ago when I started putting my work out there. And so during my journey, I also became a certified yoga teacher. So I included this whole body embodiment of healing and the somatic work into my own life, but also now into my work life, and supporting others on their holistic healing journey. So yeah, this was like a little bit about the background before all of this Instagram thing and sharing started. And I think it's important to mention this as well, because nowadays I have a lot of people who approach me and say, well, Nila, I just, I wish I can be where you are today and sharing with like so much knowledge and experience and wisdom. And I always have to remind them that it's not like there's so much that happens before this, and I just want to be authentic and I want to be real, and I still share like what's been on my mind and what I'm currently going through, because you know, healing is not a place, and there's no like finish line or being there or being completely healed. It's an ongoing process, and I know that we, like you and I, and we repeat ourselves by saying this, and sometimes it might sound like, well, you have a good saying about this, you know, you are at a stage where you can talk about it so openly. And I always have to remind myself that there are many, many people out there who are not like, who are still like stuck in this beingness, in this mindset, but also being stuck in the body, where they are maybe unable to move forward because they haven't developed the sense of awareness, and they don't know the tools of how they can become unstuck.
Right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think it's interesting that with your journey started with psychology and then ended with nutrition. And for myself, it was just the opposite. I started my journey with nutrition and then discovered that psychology is a huge component of, you know, why we do the things we do, why we continue to follow certain behaviors. And so it's interesting to see how both of our journeys are kind of reversed.
Yeah, I think like no matter how each of us start, we all know that one thing is not enough to, you know, heal holistically and also to grow and develop. And sometimes I find myself, for example, when I talk to my friends or my family who are very different, and I talk about concepts like healing, they seem to kind of not get me, because they think, oh, I'm not broken, you know, I don't need healing. What is this all about? And so I like to talk about healing in a sense that it's also about, you know, growing spiritually and also self-development. And there's so much more to it. It's not just about like healing, being healed, and then it's done, but it's about all of us becoming a better person in a way that we can become more self-aware with ourselves, but also how we engage in our relationships and in our lives in general, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm guessing sometimes you feel much like the outsider in your own family as I do.
Yeah.
So, you know, I want to ask you this. I feel like personally there's a huge stigma around the concept of trauma and healing, and that most people feel that they have had to have had some really significant, you know, tragic event occur in their life in order for them to be able to qualify for the healing process, to sign up, say, all right, sign me up. I checked the box. I had this horrific trauma. Now I can start healing. And when I have conversations with people, and we start talking about that inner journey and going within and kind of doing some self-reflecting and digging up some of that, you know, trauma, they're like, oh no, I don't have trauma in my life. I wasn't like beaten as a child. I wasn't abused. I wasn't homeless. I wasn't raped. I wasn't, you know, in a domestically violent situation. And it always baffles me that that's where our brains go first to think this is what needs healing, and that anything below that doesn't necessarily qualify as being quantitative enough to want us to, you know, initiate that process. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yes, it totally does, because I know exactly what you're talking about. When I have people come to me and I always start with talking about pain, and then I come to the concept of trauma and the definition of it, which is really, or it's still developing. You know, there are so many people out there like Bessel van der Kolk and all the other amazing trauma therapists and trauma workers. They all have their own definition of trauma, and it's not just, you know, the big T traumas and the big things that like accidents or really horrific physical or emotional traumas, but it's more important to look at what happens inside of us and with regard to what happens outside. And this might be very like different for all of us, you know. It's something like minor, or we see as like not really big, that happens in our childhood, or that repeatedly happens, you know. For example, parents judging our behavior or our being, our emotions, and have their own traumas, and so it's really how our nervous system deals, or is not unable to deal with certain aspects that happen around us. So it's so really personal. And sometimes when I just say like I explain the concept of trauma, and that it's so like individually different, then people like I see in their eyes, and I can sense in their body that they really like, they soften, you know. It's like a relief for them to know, wow, okay, this actually, I can say it was traumatic for me because I experienced it as really painful. And I think this is like also very beautiful when people can just, you know, trauma is something that traumatic experience happened to all of us. And if whether we term it as trauma or not, I think what you said about that it's still such a stigma around it in our society is, it's so sad, I guess, because so many people are unable to talk about it, or they are ashamed because they think they are the only ones, or they're even weird for having these like really painful emotions.
I agree with you. I think it's important that we have to start normalizing trauma in a sense, because the reality is, you know as well as I do that from birth to 8 years old, it's the most impressionable time in our life, when all of our stories, programs, narratives, perspectives start developing that shape who we are going to be as an adult. So that mainframe system, that computer system has been downloaded and installed. And then every morning when we rise, it's like hitting the power button, and it just loads up to that default state of everything that happened to us from birth to that specific age. And we don't even realize that we're operating from this place, and we don't question it. We don't investigate it. We just accept it as the truth. And then ultimately what I see most adults doing is defending these behaviors for the rest of their life. No matter how unhealthy and, self-sabotaging these behaviors can be, it's really hard for individuals to let go of that and start shaping new behaviors that are more aligned with who they desire to be. So,
exactly. Yeah, and I also know that a lot of people, they start like Googling, and they start searching online for the answer, or for certain concepts and methods, and they get overwhelmed. And this is also why I started this whole Instagram thing a couple of years ago, like with colorful concepts. And I really try to make this whole, like this really complex thing of healing, and also this thing of this being humanness, something we all share, to just normalize it, and to make it simpler, or in a way to combat all these knowledge and all these concepts that we know as professionals, into something like tangible for everyone. And this is also the feedback I get, and I hope that we can all continue this like conversation about healing and holding and growing and developing, that it's something, we all go through it, at some point in our lives.
Well, this is such an important concept. This information, this material is really important to me. It's a foundation of my practice as a registered dietitian, nutritionist, because I work a lot with autoimmune diseases. So specifically women who suffer with autoimmune disease. I myself got diagnosed at 18 with an autoimmune disease. And that's where my journey through holistic nutrition began, with learning how to take care of myself and, stabilize my situation. And so as I started, getting really into this work with autoimmune disease, what I recognized is that there are certain commonalities amongst all of these individuals. And typically, these diseases are deeply rooted with stress management and trauma. So we have to get to the root of the problem with the trauma and the stress management in order to really release the nervous system from constantly being in that state of stress, which is having such a negative impact on our physiology that's contributing to chronic disease and all of these autoimmune diseases. So for me, it's really important that we start making these kind of conversations around trauma and healing very, very normal, because if we want to fix our eating issues, if we want to fix our overall health and well-being, we have to start with what's going on in here with the thoughts and with our perspective in order to ever stand a chance at truly being able to have, overall health and well-being mentally and physically.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important that you say this. And also, I believe we have to kind of be more mindful and more kind to the parts that have been hurt and that are still hurting us, so we don't develop something like an eating disorder or some food habits or certain kinds of emotional patterns out of nowhere. They are all coping mechanisms that served us at one time in our life because they helped us to survive, really. And it always starts with like safety, being safe in the body, being safe in your mind, like being safe within yourself. And so this is the whole concept of self-belonging and finding a home within, which is also really important when we talk about healing. And also, I think it's so interesting that you came to the pathway of holistic healing in a diverse reverse order. But yeah, and at the end of the day, there's so many different tools and paths, and I just hope we can one day just normalize talking about these things, and
I feel like we're heading there, especially with 2020. My gosh, this year has really been quite the game changer in terms of waking people up and forcing us to kind of look at ourselves. We've had an opportunity to spend more time with ourselves than ever before in our history of lifetime that we can remember. And so I feel like there's this sort of trendy movement that's kind of happening right now with healing and people being more interested and more curious about what this whole healing journey actually looks like. So with that being said, can we kind of talk to me about what it means to harness our inner wisdom? I think it's important. I feel like that's kind of what we've all had an opportunity to happen over these last 6 months with this whole, coronavirus and quarantine and really giving us that opportunity to harness our inner wisdom. So can we kind of talk about that? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, sure. Harnessing my inner wisdom. That's actually one of my favorite topics to talk about because, I believe that we all have this sense of intuition and innate wisdom that's within of each of us. And by that I mean, again, when we look holistically at this whole concept, and harnessing the wisdom of our mind, of our body, and also of our soul. We are complex human beings, and so it really is all about like realizing at first that this wisdom is unique for us. And when I'm talking about wisdom, I always like to say that it's not just the mere knowledge we gain, but it's also practicing this knowledge. It's not enough to just know all these things, these methods, but also to practice them in a way where it's aligned with yourself. And so it's really all about learning how you can listen to yourself, what you're like, tuning inwards. What does your body need in this present moment? And this may change from moment to moment and day by day. And I believe, when we are born, no baby is born hating itself. We are all, when we are born, we have this innate wisdom, and we are so good at reading it. We are harnessing it all the time. We cry when we are hungry, or when we have unmet needs, and then like through conditioning we unlearn this really important skill. And it's nothing we talk about at school. We don't get taught about it by our parents, or mostly not. So I think it's really important now, as we are adults and we have the opportunity to unlearn and relearn certain things, that we have this like a responsibility also to really learn how we can tune into ourselves, and harness or like develop this wisdom which is unique to us. And I see a danger in like common wisdom that is getting put out into the world by saying like you have to do this method or try this path, because this is just not true. We all have this sense of feeling when something is wrong, or we try something like a new yoga class or a certain diet, and then there's a sense of, no, this might not be right for me. So the harnessing the inner wisdom, it's really complicated to talk about it in a way that I can express it with language alone, because it's something that has to be felt. I guess it's something, when we tune into our body, when I'm doing my yoga, I'm in a sense of, this is me being me, moving to music I can tune to, and that serves me in the present moment. And this is really what like practicing awareness and mindfulness, and also mixed with self-responsibility, self-forgiveness, and self-love, compassion, and belonging. Like everything that comes after self is so truly important, and something we should all try to incorporate more often out in our daily lives.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I think that, as a society over, a long period of time, we've been conditioned to be so detached from ourselves that majority of individuals really have no idea how to start looking within, how to start finding that attunement, how to start listening to that inner wisdom. So what do you recommend to somebody, let's say the average listener who's out there who's like, this whole healing thing, it sounds like I've tried everything else. Maybe this is the thing I need to do. And there's a lot of resistance because they just don't know where to get started. So how can you encourage someone to tap in and experience that inner wisdom, that attunement, that going within? How do they start?
It's a good question, because it's not an easy answer. But what I can say to it is that I know a lot of people who approach me and say, well, Nila, this sounds great, but I'm just not ready to do it, and I don't have time for this whole healing thing. And so I love to include healing in everyday experiences. So for example, a really simple tool to do so is using the five senses in any like given moment. You know, you can always notice five things you can see and hear and maybe even smell and taste and touch. So this is a really simple way to start. And also, one of the concepts I really love and practice throughout my day is practicing the gap. And what I mean by that is to practice the gap between thoughts, between emotions, between even like external things.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, when I go on a walk, I practice like actively noticing the gaps between two things, like two cars, for example, or to just practice holding the space without adding the judgment to it, you know. So and just by starting simple, by starting like really, really simple with these things, you can notice like even improvement in your relationships when you start holding a space for other people in your conversations, to not, you know, just add anything, but to just, this is the concept of like honoring the presence and mindful listening, to just be with it without adding anything at first. So yeah, being present with what is and practicing mindfulness, observing without judgment, and also like simple things when you practice a certain activity you do every day. Let's say you eat. Let's say you're sitting down to eat 3 times a day. Start by putting your phone away, you know, don't watch YouTube or anything else. Just be present with one thing at a time. And no one can tell me that they start like very, very simple, you know. Yeah.
Love that. That's great advice. Thank you for those tips. I think that for a lot of individuals, the real challenge in this initiation process is the judgment piece. I know for myself, when, you know, decades ago when I started my healing journey, that piece of letting go of the judgment was the thing that kept me from being able to consistently show up for the healing practice. I kept letting the judgment of my traumas weren't bad enough, or my traumas, you know, weren't that important, or this really isn't a big deal. I should be able to just deal with this and move on. And what's your problem? You know, all of that self-talk would start coming in and resisting me from taking the initiative to continue that process. Yoga, for me, was literally the biggest resistance place I had. I'm extremely inflexible, so I don't have a lot of flexibility. I have like the tightest hamstrings, and I have no coordination. Okay. So naturally, I show up to yoga class and I feel very uncomfortable. I don't look like everyone else. So I immediately start judging myself. And then the entire time I'm in my head, not really being present and actually connecting my mind to my muscles and what's happening. And then I would not go again. And then, you know, another year or 2 years would go by and I'd be like, oh, I really need to try that yoga thing. And then, you know, same situation. I think it was a year or two ago. I went to a yoga class. I was starting up again. And I remember being pretty insecure being in the class because everyone looked pretty advanced. And I just had a talk with myself and said, it doesn't matter. You're going to do this. It's good for you. You always feel better when you go through the, you know, the motions. So I take the class, and at the end of the class, this gentleman that was sitting next to me taps me on my shoulder and says, I just want to let you know that was really painful to watch. I will will never forget thinking to myself, okay, all righty, so no judgment, and I literally had to let it go. I just kind of laughed and said, thank you for your feedback. And then I had positive self-talk with myself the entire time I walked from the studio to my car, reminding myself of all the reasons I needed to be proud of myself and not let his comment consume me and keep me from showing up again. And so now whenever I pass him, I'll laugh. I'll think, wow, that was a really groundbreaking moment for me because I didn't allow his comment to inhibit me from showing up again. And that was real growth for me in that moment. So anyway, so my whole point with this is yoga was like the biggest place I had resistance. However, it's been one of the more rewarding places to consistently show up and practice.
Yeah. And I want to add that like yoga, it's not a thing that's only being practiced on the mat. And if it's not like something you like because you think or you believe, here again we come with our thoughts, which is one of your favorite topics, I know that. So yoga is something, especially now during this year of 2020, most studios were closed. So we really have the opportunity to start practicing within our own four walls, No one can watch us when we like do a YouTube video or something like that, So there's always this opportunity to tend towards something or to try something new without going full in. This was just a little addition to what you just said. And I think it's important maybe at this point to talk about thoughts a little bit more, because it's also part of my work in general, seeing this through a holistic lens. And when talking about thoughts, I always like to call upon the concept of killing ants, which is a synonym. So when we talk about ants, these little things, they just come in, like one doesn't come alone. There are so many thoughts, and it's really dangerous because in psychology, we talk about these meta thoughts. Mm-hmm. So it's not actually the thought in itself that's a problem, but the thought about the thought, which becomes the problem. Right. So we judge ourselves because we think a certain way, we feel a certain way, and it's really, really hard to, get rid of these ants, these automatic negative thoughts. I think it's really important to not judge ourselves in case we do, in case a thought passes our mind, which is unkind to us. That's really, really hard, but also really rewarding in the end if we learn to not judge our internal experiences.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that addition. That's such a valid point. I know for myself, historically, I suffered with a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety from traumas that I had experienced very young and all through my adulthood. And I would find myself, like you said, the ants, one shows up and the next thing you know, you're like saturated with ants. And it becomes overwhelming because you start really slipping into that very anxious, depressed state when these thoughts start taking over and you lose control and you start, I like to call it kind of spiraling down the toilet bowl. And so for myself, historically, when I have been in these moments where I, start thinking, like, let's say it's something financial. I start thinking about, oh, this bill needs to be paid and that bill needs to be paid. Oh, I got that. And then this is coming up. And then next thing you know, you're starting to you're having fear and anxiety around all of the responsibilities and things that are, have to be done financially. And next thing you know, you're thinking, oh my gosh, and what if I don't make that sale? And you just start spiraling down. It just kind of like one thing builds off of another. And next thing you know, you're in this really dark, dark place. So for me, I have found that when I find myself being aware that that's where my thoughts are going, I quickly kind of interject and remind myself like, hey, Heather, you know, that thing's going on where you start having the thought and then it has many thoughts. Well, you're heading in that direction. So I stop myself. I don't judge. I'll ask myself the question, how do you want to feel? And when I check in and ask myself how I want to feel, I quickly start stating things like, I want to feel joyful. I want to feel happy. I want to feel peace. I want to feel productive. And when you start listing off all of these really powerful words, you can't help yourself. But next thing you know, you're like, all right, I got this. Like I'm climbing the mountain, right? That's how quickly you can correct that and shift it over to allow your thoughts to start serving and working for you rather than against you.
Yeah.
So
That's
something
yeah.
I found to be very helpful for myself.
Yeah, and I also, what another concept I found really helpful is to neutralize the circumstance. And by that I mean, for example, a common example is when you're in your car and you see that the lightning is going green and the car who's before you, who's standing in front of you, is not moving forward, and you start honking maybe, and you start like really having these thoughts and against this human being in the car in front of you, thinking like, oh no, why is he not moving? And I have an appointment, or and now I'm late again. And then a second later, you know, you see an old lady crossing the street and you think, oh my gosh, how could I be so mean and so unkind in this moment, you know? And this is what I mean by practicing this gap and neutralizing the situation, by saying, by don't adding this judgment to the situation. So by just saying, well, this car is not moving. That's it. It's true, but it's just the same situation without your thought added to it, without your thinking about a situation which you might not know the whole truth about. And this is also like remembering, coming back to the present moment and knowing that not everything you think is first of all yours. So not every thoughts are yours, because they might be conditioned something from the past which is not yours to own. And also knowing that they will pass again, and it's not always true, you know. By questioning, this is the work of Byron Katie, by questioning every thought and all the beliefs you have, you come to the point where you sense, well, for example, right now, when I'm anxious because I'm doing an interview in English, which is not my first language, you know, which is really scary for me. So there might be a thought coming saying, well, Nila, you're doing so bad and you mispronounce a word. But I'm sensing, you know, my 2 feet are grounding on the ground. I'm safe in my home. I'm talking with you, Heather. And, you know, I feel very comfortable in my skin. So I can really sense it's not everything that I'm thinking right now must be true. And by just, you know, questioning these thoughts and coming aware of what is truly going on. And when you're talking about this example of finances, it's not that you cannot afford to live tomorrow or go to the grocery stores. You won't you won't die because you don't have a roof over your top, your head, or enough food, you know. So it's not that bad. It's really, it's
Well,
just,
I think part of that is that conditioning of that scarcity, right? Like we've been taught as a whole that there's not enough for everyone. So whenever it does come to finances, typically that first thought for most people is, how do I get more? How do I, you know, am I going to have enough? And so it's, you know, the reality is that we just have to check in and become aware that that's even occurring. And then again, like you mentioned, going to that state of neutrality. I think for most people to go to state of neutrality is extremely challenging because it is actually so simple. I think that we tend to overcomplicate and we want to make things a lot harder than what it needs to be. So an individual who wants to start the healing process thinks that they're going to have to do all of this like really challenging, difficult work that's going to be really uncomfortable. And the reality is that being in a state of neutrality isn't all that uncomfortable. It's pretty, it's kind of like, meh, all right. So, so what are your thoughts about that? How do you encourage someone to just be in that state of neutrality?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, because I believe, part of being human is to experience like everything, this whole package of pain and sorrow and grief, but also joy and healing and happiness, and it's this whole full spectrum. So it's really by allowing everything without suppressing anything, because once we numb something, and at first we all know that this will not work out long term. So I'm always saying, start by really allowing yourself to feel everything. And for example, for me, it's really, I have this like a past with morning depression. So whenever I wake up, I feel like, oh no, not another day. I think it's so undervalued, like waking up each morning and loving ourselves all over again. It's what a beautiful thing, to do. And it's so, for me, it was a long time where it was really hard. So whenever I wake up now, I just play my favorite songs, to get me moving, to know I'm safe. I can do this. I can rock this day. So this is just something I do every morning, because I've learned that this is what I need, and I can help myself. I don't need a guru telling me something. I don't need to go onto Instagram asking for support. I can, support myself. And I think it's a beautiful way when we come back to harnessing our inner wisdom. Also part of my group coaching program, and also part of my work in general, that we learn to harness this wisdom of our mind. And by that I mean looking at our beliefs, our thoughts and emotions going through the body. Looking at nutrition, it's also really big part of my work. We haven't really touched on that here, but it's also really, really important. Eating we really need, and why should we rather start with adding things that are serving us before we just get rid of everything? And also getting the body moving. Movement is such an important thing to unlock emotions and to really get to these things that are suppressed and that we cannot access with our mind. So that's why I think the body and movement, and also yoga and certain poses, are really, really good for this.
Our body has natural rhythms when it comes to sleeping, movement, and nutrition. And what I have found through my own practice is that because most people are so detached from themselves, they are so completely detached from their actual rhythms that they're not working in that natural circadian rhythm that the body prefers. They're working against it. And most people don't even realize that that's occurring because they're so not in tune with what their body's actually telling them, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important. And also, this is why a big part of everything I do is also turning towards rest and self-compassion and self-care. What is this whole self-love like all about? It's not just about bubble baths and champagne. It's about, again, coming back to basics and learning how you can tune towards your own needs. And whether it's lighting a candle, or like a simple example, it might be funny, but I can show you right now for the YouTube watchers. So I have a little Buddha up here. Because whenever I get scared, or whenever I have an interview like this, I just have something to anchor on, which is in my surrounding. So some people have a stone in their hand or something, they can press. And these are I know it might sound funny, but these simple things and actions that can support us in the present moment are what will bring us the most, like in the long term, and the biggest results, if you will.
Absolutely. And, to that point, I think it's important to mention that, energy, everything is energy, right? So energy can't be created nor destroyed. It's just transferred. So for you, having that globe to anchor to, you're able to transfer a lot of that anxiety and nervousness and fear that you're having, that negative, those negative frequency energy vibrations. You're able to release those by having this thing that you're anchored to that allows you to feel safe, secure, and grounded. I'm a huge fan of stones. I absolutely love crystals. Crystals are a huge part of my healing process, and it's something that I encourage and incorporate with clients as well, depending upon their circumstances. But stones have been so beneficial for me, and I just love, because it's something easy. You can put a bracelet on, and then the bracelet can really help assist with grounding and transferring energy. So there's a lot of things that we can do to assist ourselves with healing that don't require a lot of time, energy, and effort, right? Like we can start really super simple with something as easy as finding an object to ground you, or maybe, find the perfect stone bracelet. So anyway.
Yeah, that's so true. And just to add on this, because it just comes to mind, is that, emotions are energy in motion. And scientists have discovered that every emotion only lasts for 90 seconds. So that's 1.5 minutes, and most people don't know this. It's again, the emotion gets stuck, or if it's not transformed into another state of energy, then it gets transmuted and transmitted. So it gets suppressed. And this is where all the ants start coming at us, and we think about this feeling, and we think about this emotion and the sensation even, and this is where it gets dangerous. And I think by just having simple things like a bracelet or crystals, a stone, and reading cards, tarot cards, or having something to anchor and to ground yourself into the present moment, might sound simple, but it's really effective. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. So talk to me a little bit about self-healing versus self-directed healing. What is the difference between the two?
Yeah, so thank you for addressing this topic, because I believe it's quite dangerous what I see nowadays with this whole self-healing concept. I won't dismiss it. So I really like this self-empowerment and knowing that at the end of the day, you are the one who is in charge of your life and your healing, your growth, and everything included. So you are responsible. But at the same time, it dismisses this thing that it's also very important to ask, and it's not just important, it's okay, and a sign of strength to ask for support on our journey, because we cannot do it all alone, and we were actually never meant to. We don't heal in a vacuum and in isolation. We need other people, and again, we need other people to learn how to co-regulate, so that we can learn to regulate ourselves. So co-regulation always comes before self-regulation. And when someone is, looking at the phone, or nowadays on Google, and like looking on the internet for support and help, it's kind of really dangerous. I see it nowadays in like my work life, when people come to me and say they've tried so many things, they've like listened to all the gurus and read all the articles, but they still feel stuck, and I say, yeah, because we need this direction. So this is all about self-directed healing, and not just self-healing, yes, but also asking and turning towards support, and yeah, without having the stigma around like getting need or going to therapy or coaching, or just knowing that at the end of the day you are in charge and you will always be, but you don't have to do it alone. Yeah.
I think that a lot of people, when they are trying to do the self-healing without the self-directed healing, that they tend to find themselves getting stuck in these negative healing loops. And then they become very frustrated because they're like, I've done the classes, I've taken the courses, I've gone to the webinar, I went to the event, I read the audiobook, I read the book, and they're still left feeling exactly the same, except now they have like all of this additional information, but they don't know how to organize it and implement it and apply it to their everyday life in a way that is realistic and sustainable for them to actually allow the healing and growth part to take, process. So, so for that person who's listening, who can really relate to this, thinking, okay, I'm that person, I've done all of the self-healing, how do you convince them that they need to incorporate the directed part? Like, how can you sell that?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. I must say I don't have an answer to this.
Fair enough.
Because I'm really good at my work. I'm really good at what I do. I love supporting others on their journey. But I'm really, really bad when it comes to marketing and selling something which is, really hard we cannot convince anyone to do anything. And I think it's also dangerous if we as practitioners start to just, sell our method as the best or the most effective, which might not be true. And we must always realize that not everyone is at the state energetically, financially, time-wise, where they can really invest in something like a program or a one-on-one coaching. But what I can always say is, for a listener who's now feeling really stuck after trying so many different things, is start with community. Start with, if you are not at a place, that's also something I teach in my work, and when you're not at a place where you are able to share your story yet, because I'm a big believer that our pain can be transmuted into passions and wounds can be turned into wisdom. Because I know that from my own experience, there's so much wisdom we can generalize from our own experiences, from our trauma, our past pain. Just start by writing these things that are on your mind down for yourself, like start small by journaling. And after that, when you feel comfortable having written it down, it seems like something has been released from you, you have kind of taking a small step towards taking it out of your heart and getting a little bit lighter on the inside. So after that, start by talking to a good friend, someone you trust, maybe your partner or a family member. And after that, I always suggest to share it publicly. So for example, you start by sharing it on a blog or writing for a magazine or doing an Instagram or Facebook post about it, like I do nowadays. I'm at a place where it feels safe for me to really talk about my own pain. But if someone like a listener is not able to do so, really start by tuning towards those people you can trust, those safe people. Community is such an important part of healing.
Yeah, I think that's such a fabulous, fabulous tip, to turn to community, because I think that is a piece where if they feel they have the support from the community, then they can more easily embrace that directive type process, because they feel safe, they feel supported in that environment in order to be able to take that next step. Mike,
Yeah.
you and I could literally talk forever. This stuff is just this is the stuff that gets me, to jump up out of bed in the morning and super excited. I was so excited about having this podcast with you today. I woke up several hours earlier than I should have, but I was just so excited to come here today and ask you a lot of questions and really pick your brain. You're so knowledgeable. You're so wise. I keep seeing this owl sitting behind you and thinking, my goodness, what a perfect representation of you. You're so knowledgeable and you're the way that you share the information is just so beautifully compassionate and encouraging. I feel like the audience just really can feel embraced and nurtured by you and your gifts. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, Heather.
I hate that we have to wrap this up. It's been so fabulous. Now, I know you have a new program that you're going to be releasing October 1st, and right now you have an early bird special that will be running until, is it August 31st?
Yes.
Okay, so you guys are going to want to head over and check out Nila's The Total Transformation Group Coaching Program that will be releasing October 1st. I am sure it is going to be packed with all kinds of amazing value to help individuals feel secure and supported on their healing journey. So that's fabulous. Make sure you guys head over and check that out. So again, Nila, where can the audience find you?
So one of my favorite places is Instagram these days, but also on my website aboutthegoodlife.me. I also have an email list, and I have a free 28-day journal, Embracing Wholeness. So that's where I would suggest everyone to start if they are eager to learn more about themselves and harnessing their inner wisdom. And I think Instagram is always my humble home on the web.
Fabulous. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and encouragement, motivation with us today. You are a beautiful soul. Your aura is so bright, despite the shade that you think you're sitting in from the light. You are shining so bright, girlfriend. You just have an absolutely illuminated soul. Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you very much. The same goes right back to you, Heather.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Think Yourself Healthy podcast. Make sure you leave a review and let me know what you think. I love reading your feedback. Come hang out with me on Instagram at Heather Duranja, and don't forget to take a screenshot that you're listening to the podcast and tag me. I love to share it. See you on the next episode.